A merchant caravan cautiously advances through the rugged trails of the Arcadian mountains, coming from the city of Tegea. The caravan is comprised of a diverse group of men and women, dressed in linen tunics and woolen garments, each dedicated to various tasks that keep the caravan moving. Artisans, traders, and armed escorts can be seen, each playing their role in this collective effort. The sound of mule and horse hooves echoes in the air, mixing with hushed conversations and the jingling of bells hanging from reins. The animals bear heavy baskets, sacks, and amphorae filled with valuable goods to be exchanged in cities and towns along their route. The caravan is led by an experienced driver, someone who knows the roads and precautions necessary to successfully traverse the mountains. The caravan moves forward with determination under the leadership of Pelops, a man whose lineage can be traced back to the legendary Perseus, the house of Sthenelus, rulers of Argos. In Argolid society, the Perseus lineage is considered the highest and noblest, bestowed with prestige and respect for generations. The Perseids are seen as direct descendants of mythical heroes and gods, granting them a position of authority and power over the region. Pelops is an imposing figure in every sense. His dark hair falls in carefully braided and wavy locks that frame his chubby and marked face. His intense gray eyes, a characteristic feature of Perseus' descendants, seem to pierce to the heart of the matters he handles. His carefully groomed beard accentuates his dignified and authoritative appearance, adorned with small gold details, symbols of his noble status. But beyond his appearance, it is cunning and intelligence that truly distinguish Pelops. In a world where diplomacy and commerce are as crucial as military might, Pelops stands out as one of the smartest men in Argos. Specializing in trade and the complexities of political relationships, he has cultivated a deep understanding of the customs and interests of the cities in southern Hellas. His skills in forging alliances and beneficial agreements are highly valued by his lineage and his people. Pelops' presence at the head of the caravan is an affirmation of his role as a leader both in the Argos court and in the world of business. His ability to navigate the political and economic challenges that the Perseids face in a region full of rivalries and tensions showcases his prowess and the confidence his peers place in him. With the lineage of the Perseids on his back and his sharp, calculating mind, Pelops moves forward with the responsibility of leading his merchant caravan through challenging lands and toward an uncertain destination in search of success and fortune. As they advance through steep paths, the merchants occasionally cast glances toward the snow-covered peaks that surround their way. The fresh air and the scent of pine contrast with the heat and dust they leave behind in Tegea. As they approach the summit, the mountains open before them, revealing the vastness of the Aegean Sea stretching on the horizon. Although the view should fill them with hope and excitement, the faces of the merchants are tense and worried. The true test lies in the swamp of LERNA, blocking their path to the coast. Stories of its dangers have been passed down for generations: monstrous creatures, treacherous waters, and impassable terrain. While the merchants trust the teachings of their ancestors, they know they must face this challenge directly if they are to reach their destination. The animals are carefully guided through the terrain, and the merchants advance one after another, ready to support each other if needed. The merchant caravan moves determinedly toward the swamp, the ultimate destination still in their minds. Tensions rise with each step, but so does their resolve. As a united team, they trust that they will overcome this obstacle and make their way to the vast and mysterious Aegean, where opportunities and challenges await on every shore and port. As the caravan moves through the Arcadian mountains, springs begin to appear more frequently, a gift from the gods in the midst of the arid landscape. The terrain gradually changes from the rocky hills of Hellenic chaparral to a transitional world, where the land begins to yield to moisture. The dry, thorny vegetation that characterized the area gives way to taller, greener grasses and shrubs struggling to root themselves in the ground. As the caravan ventures into the LERNA region, the transformation of the landscape becomes more evident. The land becomes soft and soaked, and the uneven terrain makes progress difficult. The once compact, firm soil now turns to mud, making the path slippery and cumbersome. The wagon wheels sink into the soft ground, and the animal's steps become heavier. Dense vegetation emerges from the moist earth, creating a sea of green that stretches in all directions. Bushes grow lush, and reeds rise tall, their leaves rustling and whispering in the wind. As the caravan advances, the entangled plants seem to want to close the path, as if nature itself were trying to impede the traveler's progress. The swampy, vegetation-filled terrain makes progress even more challenging. The wagons move with difficulty, and the roads become tortuous and slow. Every step must be carefully considered to avoid getting stuck in the mud or entangled in the dense vegetation. The once clear and straight path has become a twisted and challenging trail. As the caravan struggles to move forward, the sounds of the swamp fill the air. The splashing of water, the croaking of frogs, and the calls of waterfowl blend in a natural chorus. But this swamp, though beautiful, is an obstacle that slows down the journey. Every step is a challenge, every advance a triumph over the hostile nature. The caravan continues forward, navigating this new landscape of contradictions, where beauty and difficulty are intertwined in a challenge that only the most determined can overcome. As the caravan advances through the swamp of LERNA, the atmosphere becomes increasingly unsettling. The birdsong becomes a strange and mysterious symphony, a chorus that seems to oscillate between the beautiful and the sinister. Waterfowl emit squawks and calls that resonate among the reeds and water, creating a cacophony of sounds that appear to emanate from the shadows. In the midst of the vegetation, travelers occasionally have encounters with large and elusive reptiles. The sinuous silhouette of a snake slips among the bushes, its scales glistening in the sunlight. Some members of the caravan stop when they see it, recalling stories of venomous snakes that inhabit the area. The murmur of prayers and offerings to protective deities fills the air as they improvise antidotes with local plants. In their progress, some men suffer snake bites from vipers hiding in the vegetation. The sensation of their fangs piercing the skin is agonizing, and the venom begins to course through their veins, leaving them weak and dazed. Fellow travelers rush to their side, applying herbal poultices and performing rituals in a desperate attempt to counteract the poison. The cries of pain and lamentations mix with the birdsong and the swamp's hubbub, creating an oppressive atmosphere of imminent danger. Men begin to look around nervously, every shadow and movement among the vegetation makes them jump with nervousness. Every noise becomes a potential threat, and fear looms over the caravan like a dark cloud. Encounters with the swamp's animals, though mostly harmless, have become a constant reminder of the relentless nature surrounding them. The line between reality and imagination blurs in the swamp, where the forms of local fauna become mysterious and terrifying creatures in the eyes of the travelers. Cretero, we need to move as quickly as possible. We cannot afford delays in this inhospitable terrain, Pelops urged with determination, his gray eyes fixed on the horizon. Cretero, an experienced man aware of the dangers lurking in the swampy lands, responded cautiously, "Lord, I understand your desire to move forward, but our men are exhausted. They have been marching without rest and need time to recover." Pelops frowned, frustrated by Cretero's resistance. "I understand the fatigue of the men, Cretero, but every moment of delay increases the risks we face. The swamp of LERNA is no place to linger. We must maintain the pace and reach our destination before darkness falls upon us." As the discussion continued, a mule brayed in terror, breaking the debate with its sharp and alarming sound. In an instant, the guardsmen hurried to form a protective phalanx, their pikes pointing around in an attempt to detect any hidden threat. Tension hung in the air, and Pelops was about to reprimand the men for their excessive nervousness. However, before he could speak a word, his gaze also lifted, following the direction of the mule. An expression of bewilderment and dismay crossed his face as his gray eyes scanned the horizon. The moment had brought everyone to an uncertain pause, united in their uncertainty and in the presence of the unknown that seemed to loom on the horizon. In that instant, there was no room for discussion or resistance. Only the understanding that they had entered a domain where the rules of nature seemed to distort, and they had to face challenges that transcended human understanding. Upon the robust body of the creature, scales interlocked to form an impenetrable shell that extended from head to tail. From this armor emerged two heads, each with its own gaze of diabolical intensity. The tail, long and muscular, sported sharp spikes resembling the horns of a ram, ready to charge and destroy. The creature's arms and legs were as thick as ancient tree trunks, culminating in heavy claws that seemed capable of shattering rocks with ease. As it advanced, the creature left a powerful imprint on the terrain, evidencing its colossal strength and dominant presence. Between the crevices of its scales, a thick green mist emanated, like the vapor rising from hot rocks under the rain on mountain peaks. This mysterious mist obscured the men's vision, enveloping their surroundings in an aura of enigmatic darkness. The travelers' eyes began to sting and burn, as if soaked in pure vinegar, exacerbating the tension and bewilderment they already felt. The monstrous creature seemed to emerge from the darkest nightmares, an amalgamation of strength and terror that defied all logic and reality. Faced with such a sight, the men of the caravan understood that they were confronting something far beyond their comprehension, something that transcended their experience and their worth in the known world. The men in the caravan reacted instinctively, raising their spears and forming an improvised barrier to keep the creature's heads at bay. However, the surprise and ferocity of the creature exceeded any calculation. Suddenly, a third head emerged from the depths of the ground, breaking the formation of the defenders and sowing chaos among them. As the main head continued its advance, others emerged from the swamp, as if a dark subterranean army rose to confront the travelers. 5 heads in total rose from the depths, each exhaling a green vapor that snaked through the air and enveloped the environment in an even more oppressive atmosphere. When the men realized that the monster's jaws were engulfing their comrades in a single gulp, despair spread among the soldiers, and their formation dissolved into tumultuous confusion. Faced with the stampede and fear that gripped the men, many abandoned their spears and weapons and, in a frantic flight, tried to get as far away as possible from the terrifying manifestation. The caravan, which had advanced with determination through the challenges of nature, was now confronted with a threat completely beyond their understanding, immersed in the abyss of mythology and terror. The courage of Pelops, forged in countless situations, wavered for a moment as the monstrous presence of the heads loomed over him. The idea of wielding his meteoric iron sword and facing the beast crossed his mind, but eye contact with one of the reptilian eyes was enough to freeze his determination in an icy grip of fear. He felt his insides twist, and an intense cold seized his body, as if the very depths of the underworld had enveloped him in their icy embrace. The sword, a symbol of his power and bravery, slipped from his hand and sank into the swamp's mud, like a manifestation of his own defeat in the face of the incomprehensible. Pelops could not resist the overpowering impulse. His heart raced, and his mind could conceive only one action: to flee. His feet moved in desperation, dragging his body out of the influence zone of the heads and their dreadful entourage. Behind him, chaos spread, with men who, like him, had left behind weapons, riches, and possessions, all in an attempt to escape the abyss that had opened before them. Courage had been swept away by the tsunami of the unknown, and what had been a caravan of resolute and hopeful men had turned into a mob of terrified refugees seeking safety. As Pelops' hurried steps carried him farther from the swamp and the monstrous heads, he faced not only the fear for his own life, but also the bitter taste of defeat in the face of the uncontrollable. The caravan's fate had been altered by an encounter with the supernatural, and as he ran with his heart in his throat and the feeling of being watched by inhuman eyes etched in his mind, the leader of Argos confronted a new reality where myths and legends demonstrated their overwhelming power to intrude into everyday life. The cries of anguish and fear that had initially filled the air faded away in the wind as Pelops ventured deeper into the heart of the swamp. Despite the speed of his steps, the surroundings began to slow down around him, as if time itself were taking a pause. The cacophony of disturbing sounds gave way to a sepulchral silence, only interrupted by the constant chorus of croaking frogs in the stagnant water and the songs of birds returning to their nests at the end of a busy day. Pelops felt like he was running, walking, and panting in a strange trance, as if he were disconnected from his own body and immersed in a world of reverie. The surroundings of the swamp became hazy and ethereal. The dense vegetation seemed to twist and change shape as he passed. The greenish mist emanating from the cracks in the creature's scales had left an imprint in the air, as if the same fear that had invaded the men had materialized in that unsettling fog. Pelops' heart pounded, and each beat resonated in his head like a persistent drum. Sweat soaked his forehead, and his breath was labored, but a strange sense of stillness surrounded him, as if he were suspended between two worlds. The frenzied running transformed into a slow and solemn pace, as if he were advancing through an intricate and dreamlike world. However, inside him, Pelops remained aware of the urgency of the situation. He knew he couldn't afford to get trapped in that state of alienation. With monumental effort, he fought against the feeling of dizziness and slowness that enveloped him and forced his muscles to move with renewed determination. Each step brought him closer to the edge of the swamp, where the dense vegetation gave way to firmer ground. Finally, with one last push, Pelops emerged from the swamp and returned to solid ground. He found himself panting and exhausted, but also free from the strange influence that had enveloped him. The swamp was left behind, with its secrets and mysteries, and before him lay a clear path to the city of LERNA. Relief flooded his being as the world returned to its familiar form. The sounds of the surroundings filled his ears again, the rustling of leaves under his feet, the whispering whine through the trees, and the chirping of birds in the sky. Pelops found himself catching his breath and gathering his determination to continue, aware that he had escaped an experience that defied all logic and understanding but had left an indelible mark on his memory and his heart. LERNA rose modestly on the stage of the surrounding countryside. Its walls, built with the stones provided by nature on the rocky outcrop, formed a protective circle around this small city. The wall, a primitive but solid engineering feat, stood as high as 3 times the height of an average man, its stones weathered by time and the elements but still testifying to the skill of its builders. Inside the confines of the wall, the intramural population of around 1,200 souls shared their space with narrow and tightly packed dwellings, where red clay tiles and adobe formed a compact yet homely view. The streets, barely wide enough to allow the passage of an ox-drawn cart, meandered through this intricate network of houses and alleys. The sounds of daily life resonated in the streets, the tinkling of the blacksmith, the songs of wandering vendors offering their goods, and the cheerful commotion of children playing in open spaces. But despite its modesty, LERNA did not lack splendor. At its heart stood the main temples, modest compared to later wonders but revered by the community. Its columns of carved wood and altars adorned with offerings from the faithful rose as symbols of the faith that bound the population. The palace, though not ostentatious, radiated an air of authority from its location in the center of the city. Its stone and wood structure, with gabled roofs covered in tiles, served as a constant reminder of the social and political hierarchy that existed in LERNA. Here, the leaders of the community made decisions that affected everyone, guided by ancestral customs and respect for the land that sustained them. The true splendor of LERNA, however, emanated from its natural surroundings. From the rocky outcrop where the city stood, small springs emerged to feed streams that meandered through the surrounding countryside. Floral and fruit-bearing trees grew abundantly along these watercourses, creating a picturesque and vibrant landscape. During the appropriate seasons, the scents of flowers and the flavors of fruits filled the air, giving LERNA an enchanting aura. Pelops, exhausted and with his heart racing, found himself in a desperate situation. The density of the swamp, now left behind, had exacted a heavy toll. Many of his trusted men had disappeared into the muddy depths, and much of his personal wealth had sunk into the mire. Despite the losses, Pelops clung to a thread of life and hope. Each inhalation and exhalation of his chest was a constant reminder of his survival, and each beat of his heart drove him forward. The images of the inhospitable and treacherous swamp crowded his mind, but there was something even more threatening that propelled him to overcome exhaustion: the multi-headed dragon, which many simply called the water serpent or just Hydra. This mythological being, the nightmare beast lurking in the swamp, loomed as a sinister shadow in his consciousness. Pelops had heard the stories from his men, the accounts of his companions lost in the mud and mire, of the malevolent eyes and serpentine heads that had snatched lives and hopes. Rumors or not, Pelops knew he had to warn his father, an influential and wise man, about this imminent threat. As he advanced toward his destination, toward the relative safety of the walls of LERNA, Pelops planned how he would present his case. Fatigue weighed on him, but the urgency of his message infused him with renewed energy. He knew he had to persuade his father of the seriousness of the situation, that LERNA's trade route to Tegea and southern Hellas was not only in danger but could be a deadly trap for any unsuspecting caravan. As the sun set on the horizon and shadows lengthened, Pelops kept his mind focused on his goal. Darkness began to spread its cloak over the land, but his determination still burned like a torch in the night.